and certainly a dream and a vision that we share. So recognizing that the majority of resumes never see a human, they go through systems. So any initiative in this way has to be machine readable. But then, as you said, ultimately putting that context in the hands of the learner, and helping them with that transition from learner to earner and lifelong learning.
It is tricky because there's a big brother problem here too, of course, that we have to recognize ethically. I written an opinion paper which kind of goes with this interview and will probably appear on my LinkedIn or somewhere. But in the opinion paper, I talk about the notion that what if I was recognized that for walking at 14 months, and let's say you were recognized for walking at 9 months. So we had a micro-credential that says Dan walked at 9 months, and I have a machine-readable micro-credential that says Mark walked at 14 months. What if some smart employer does some kind of algorithm and works out that the best employees walked before they were 12 months old? For the rest of your life, no matter what else you or I could do, you would get the interview and I wouldn't. Right. So there's a chance that if we get this wrong, we can give people, if we get the use of data wrong, we could get it really wrong for a lot of people and sentence people to a lifetime of inadequacy, not just adequacy. So we do have to be very careful and take a positivist view of this. In other words, we need to build an ethical framework around this future of machine readable skills and individual skills recognition as well. But and like anything, you know, there's the risk of fraud and all that. But if we stop any development because of the risks of misuse, then we'd never develop anything, you know. So and there's plenty of examples of that kind of thinking. So what I think we need to do is put all of this work in the context of how are we favouring humanity, you know, humankind. What are we doing that is improving things for ourselves? And in that sense, empowering people, I think, is a noble motive.
Right. No, you raised some really interesting points there, Mark. And I would say, you know, the flip side is that this approach will hopefully increase the diversity and equity, right? So that building on your example of when you walked, well, it will no longer be judged based on the color of your skin or the color of your eyes or socioeconomic, you know, that it should just be, you have the skill of walking, and that is the most important thing. But,
and to that end, we're going to need ethical frameworks. So I think the institutions will belong in the future, but what they'll be doing is defending ethical frameworks rather than dealing with the mechanics. So instead of being like the rubber stamp that says, you did it, you know, it'll be more like that all of the data, all of the things that happened were ethically framed, and the use of these recognitions are being done in an ethical manner. And that's what the future of institutional work should be. Unfortunately, I don't think it's where the institutions are heading. And so I think we've got, those of us who've been around a while, got some work to turn that around, you know, and make our leaders aware of these issues. They tend to have a very simplistic view. I'll give you an example. Recent interviews I've heard of, if you talk to the government about the future of the current government about the future of vocational education, they want to favour private provision and, you know, a laissez-faire market, and they've got some good arguments for that. If you talk to the opposition about it, they just want to move everything back under the public banner and have it delivered by TAFE and fund TAFE as a public provider. They're very simplistic discussions. The sort of stuff we're talking about is at a much higher order level, and at a policy level, I just don't see enough people talking about it at this level. And I think it's time to promote a higher order discussion around, doesn't matter where you learn it or how you learn it, or who paid. What matters is knowing what you learned and how to apply it.
Agreed. And for the learners to have sovereignty over that data, for privacy reasons, but that's where things like micro-credentials and short form courses and really we're starting increasingly blurring the lines between informal, non-formal, and formal learning, and looking to aggregate people's skills from all of those. And again, coming back to recognition of prior learning being so critical for this to enable learners at any stage of their life, we're all learners, to be able to assemble the view or multitude of views that they want to present to the world for a particular job or for a particular volunteer opportunity, whatever it might be.
It raises another interesting question, of course, of who are you? Who are you, Dan? No, what I mean by that's the Web 2, Web 3 argument. Who owns your identity, right? Is it mygov.id, or is it Microsoft? Dan at exchange.com, or is it Google? Is it Dan at gmail.com, or is it Facebook, or is it who owns your identity? And the answer must be you. And so again, we've got a lot of work to do around the ethics of identity management going forward. And it's not just about who can steal your identity, but it's about who actually owns your identity. And so again, in this resume area and data area, I think we need other institutions than Microsoft or Google or Facebook or Apple or even a government of any particular nation who enables your personal ownership of your identity. And that's a tricky space too. In other words, my identity meaning what my skills framework looks like what I can do. There are other dimensions of identity, of course, is my health profile and so on and so forth. Traditional thinking says the government is the place, national government that you belong to, and that's reasonable. But many of us work across many nations these days, and so we find our Microsoft identity more useful on a global basis. I've lost count of how many Microsoft accounts I've got and how many Google accounts I've got, and it drives me insane. So there needs to be a move, I think, in this area towards the Web 3 world, where you have open identity and a clear understanding of your own identity, and away from the Web 2, which is the current circumstance where, depending on the organization we're in as to whether a Microsoft or Google or whatever type of ID, IBM used to be, so I think we've got some work to do there about who are we, who is our data, where is our data stored.
That's right. And fortunately, colleagues in the EU are really taking a lead on that globally. So we have some examples to learn from them. But it's a very complex and merging the corporate interests with personal interests and governmental interests and
educational interests, which is the point we're addressing. So when you own a set of micro-credentials, what's their context? Who owns them? How are they used? Do they expire? Are they progressive? Do they grow? They're really big questions that we're only just starting to address. Micro-credentials sounds very convenient, and people have hopped onto the convenience of them. In the university context, for example, a micro-credential seems a great way of doing a mini degree. Like we can take our intellectual property and just teach it in little bits.
Chunk it up, yeah.
But anybody doesn't take very smart thing to go, well, what do those little bits mean? You might know how to cut a scalpel cut in my head, but I don't necessarily want you to continue with the surgery.
Trust me, I'll stay away from that. Yes.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So we got a lot of work to do on this. It's not a simple area. It's a very appealing area, and unfortunately, I feel like too many people get stuck at the surface and are not working at the deeper, mining to the deeper levels of issues we need to address.